The regular January meeting of the Concord Zoning Board of Adjustment. We will follow our usual procedure this evening, which is to say we will hear the cases in the order in which they appear in the agenda. We will first ask the appellants to come up, be sworn in and seated in the chairs to my right, and to offer any testimony that they would like us to hear. We ask them to confine their testimony to a 10-minute interval, if at all possible. We will then ask, after the appellant has concluded their testimony, we will ask them to step down. We will then solicit testimony from anyone in the audience who is in favor of the appeal and anyone in the audience who is in opposition to the appeal. We ask that those members of the audience who testify confine their testimony to 5 minutes. After that, we'll check in with code enforcement to see if there's any comments from their office. And then, following all of that, if there has been any information offered that seems to bear factual clarification, the appellant will have the opportunity to offer that clarification, not new evidence, prior to the conclusion of the public testimony portion of the hearing. Under most circumstances, the board will act on each case as it is presented on the agenda before moving on to the next. There are certain circumstances where we have either adjourned or tabled cases pending more information. We do have a couple of pieces of that are slightly unusual this evening. One is we only have a 4-member board tonight. Normally we have a 5-member board, but we do not have 5 members available. In the event that you wish to have your case heard by a 5-member board, you're entitled to do so. We will adjourn the case till next Wednesday, trusting that we can pull together a 5-member board on that evening. If you choose to go forward this evening, which you can also do, we will be heard by a 4-member board, and it will still require 3 members of the board for any motion to pass to vote in favor of that motion. And the fact that you were heard by a 4-member board will not constitute grounds for a rehearing. The other item that I want to mention before we get started is that we have a very full agenda this evening. So I strongly encourage you to, if you're going to testify, to stick to the criteria for either a zoning variance or a zoning special exception, whichever is appropriate in your case. Eschew all other matters and be as brief as you can out of consideration for those who follow you and in order to avoid the board becoming grumpy and humorless during the course of the evening, which we really don't want. The first case we have before us this evening is case 46.
Do you want to check if anybody wants to
speak? I'm sorry. Does anyone wish to withdraw due to the fact that we're only a 4-member board? Mr. Damati?
Can I approach?
Sure. I saw your hand too, sir. I'll ask it in a moment.
Mr. Chairman, as you know, I'm representing Concord Hospital, the last on the agenda. It's 2 parts. One part is an appeal of an administrative decision. The second part is for a variance. Begging the board's indulgence, we would be happy to go forward with the appeal of the administrative decision with a 4-member zoning board. If the board agrees with Craig's interpretation and ours, the case is finished and we don't even need the variance. If the board doesn't agree, then we would come back next Wednesday for the variance. Is that an acceptable procedure?
Any problem with that? That's fine with us.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Can I approach?
Absolutely.
My name is Aaron Spedlow. I'm with NextEra Energy Resources with West Portsmouth Street Solar Project. And we were hoping to just reduce your agenda for this evening. We could come back next Wednesday if that's okay with you.
That's fine with us.
Okay. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. We'll have 5 members for you here next Wednesday.
Okay. Excellent.
It's 4-18.
Thank you.
Pardon?
4-18.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. So to be clear, because these cases have been recessed and potentially recessed, the board will reconvene next Wednesday evening at 7 o'clock in these chambers and actually it will open and close open and recess the meetings formally. So there will be no additional notices sent out to the public. Public notice is hereby given.
Okay. With that, what we'll do is, was it 418?
4-18.
Yeah. We'll open that case, West Portsmouth Street Solar LLC for LA Brochu Incorporated, Do I hear a motion to adjourn that case, recess that case until next Wednesday?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The case is recessed for 1 week. We needn't take that motion on the other variance because that may not come up. If it does, we will. The first case then that we will consider this evening is case 4617, Lee B. Marden, Revocable Trust of 2001, who is requesting a variance to the table of principal uses to permit offices of healthcare practitioners, i.e. physical therapy, where such uses are not permitted, and a variance to the table of principal uses to permit dance or music school or studio where such uses are not permitted, for property at 134 Hall Street, Units 1 and 2, located in an high-end industrial district. Mr. Martin, do you swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Would you have a seat, please, and give us your name for the record, please?
My name is Lee Marden, and I'm here representing my family as trustee of the Lee B. Marden Revocable Trust of 2001, the owner of the property in question.
Would you like to touch on the high points of your request?
I have a written statement which I'd like to give to the board,
All right.
and if necessary, I'll read through it, or if it's accepted, we won't even go through that. But I do have some just orientation materials on the boards behind me, which just sort of give you the highlight. I can actually use the one that's up on the board, but first let me use this one. This is the current zoning down on Hall Street.
Very dark on Hall Street, isn't it?
Sorry?
I said it's very dark on Hall Street. Can we get some lights on there, Greg? Sure.
But the Boatown line is down here. The wastewater treatment plant is here. Merrimack River looped through. Railroad tracks to downtown, Interstate 93. Main Street is over here. And the history of the zoning here is I started to develop this in 1979, finished construction on these 5 buildings in 1988, and then eventually bought this. There was a house here and a small lot, which is the subject of the hearing tonight. And I rented that for a number of years. It eventually burned down. It stayed grass for a number of years, and it was this year that we decided to complete the streetscape by designing a building that matches the frontage of the other 4 buildings and to complete the construction of 134 Hall Street. However, a zoning change occurred. The zoning was MB with a RDV overlay, which basically has now become the Opportunity Corridor zoning. And the city in 2002 did a rezoning. The MB had been there since 1977, and before that it was residential agriculture. And so we built this, and when we proposed to build a new addition, the zoning officer said and it's been right from the very start, because at the time the zoning was changed, I came to City Hall and I said, what's going to happen to the uses that I have? And they said, well, in your existing buildings, they'll be grandfathered under the MB previous zoning. But this is a new building since it's become industrial. And so 2 tenants, one in 128 and one in 124, these folks are operating on 2 floors. They're a physical therapy business. And these folks in 128, which is the dance studio, needs to enlarge and relocate. So they're going into units 1 and 2. In 3, a company that's been back here, which is an electrical wholesale supply warehouse, is allowed under the industrial use. So what we're asking is that the variance allow the natural completion of the Concord Business Center with the completed uses that are in the neighborhood now. And these 2 businesses have actually been there, one for 25 years and one for 10 years. Pretty much that's all in what I've written to you.
It was also in the application you filed, correct?
Yes, sir. And then the next one is showing the original 134, which was started in 1980 and finished in 1985 in 3 different sections. And then the rest of the park was bought separately, and the 4 buildings there were built. And this is the piece we're talking about. And you may remember that I was here back on October 4th looking for a special permit for, which is a permitted and allowed use on the 2nd floor, which is above where we're proposing the physical therapy group go, for a security caretaker apartment, and that exception was granted. And then this last depiction actually shows the spaces. This will be the electrical supply warehouse. This would be the 3 dance studios, and the physical therapy is under the caretaker unit, which is shown by the dash lines in the most southerly unit.
This is what you're proposing?
That's what we're proposing. Under the industrial zoning, and that's in the written document that I've given you, fitness centers are allowed, which would include jazzercise and Zumba and other dance sort of things. But when we look at the specific use of a dance studio, it's omitted under the industrial zone. That's the reason, the need for the variance. The same thing with the physical therapy. The physical therapy, medical therapy is not allowed, but professional offices are, and everyone who works in this office is a licensed professional. So I see some conflict within the zoning as well as the reasonableness of continuing the uses that have been originally allowed, on the neighboring site. As to it being an unusual situation, I think this is the only business park in the industrial development. This is a retail or trucking firm. This is open land of Andersgate Beverage that took over the Bow packaging plant, and which is a wholesale beer distribution warehouse now. And the piece we're talking about, compared to the general industrial area, is minuscule. This is the last development that will be done on this site. The rear of the site here is wet and has been zoned residential to protect that wetland, so it wouldn't be developed. And so this is the completion of what I started 37 years ago. The addenda that's attached to the written statement that I gave you refers and speaks to the actual questions in your handout relative to variance requirements that we need to answer. And again, I can read that whole thing, but I don't like grumpy boards, and boards don't like grumpy contestants, so I'll stop. If I look a little off to your right when you're saying something, it's because I've lost hearing in this ear. It's a temporary problem due to an ear infection, so I'm not trying to not look at you. I'm trying to point my right ear at you.
Okay. Unless I misunderstand, the information in your addendum here is similar to, if not the same, as the information that you filed in your application.
Yes, sir.
I believe there's 2 separate applications, one for Unit 1 and one for Unit 2.
Right.
For each of the 2 uses.
Questions from the board? Nick, any questions?
No.
Any questions?
Just to make sure I understood what you said right, you're not really going to have any new tenants. You're adding the new unit, and the dance studio is taking an extra space, and then the physical therapists are moving into the new space.
Right. Where the physical therapist is coming into the new addition, their old space we have already rented. The dance studio,
I see.
when it moves, the tenant next to them needs to expand and is taking their space. The only tenant we don't have yet is for the electrical warehouse, which is not part of this hearing because it's allowed permitted under the industrial zoning. And
So what you're requesting at this hearing is the continued use of what's been ongoing for years, just in the new space?
in the new addition, yes, sir.
Any other questions? Is there anything else you'd like us to know?
No, Mr. Chairman, thank you very much for the opportunity to come before you and for the service that you provide us, citizens of Concord.
Thank you. Is there anyone who would like to be heard in favor of this appeal? Is there anyone who'd like to be heard in opposition to it? Any comments from code enforcement?
Well, yeah, just pointing out the fact that, the part of the situation here is you do have 3 different properties, and the uses are being proposed to be moved from one property to a new addition on a different property, and that's really what's pushing forward the requirement for variances, in addition to the fact that it's a new structure, so it's not covered under the vesting.
Very good. With that, I guess we'll declare the public testimony portion of the hearing closed. Thank you, Mr. Moore.
Members?
We've heard testimony. The request is for variances to continue existing uses in the complex, but move them to new buildings. These uses were grandfathered in their old locations and have been present for many years, but require variances because they're being relocated to different buildings, and I assume also because they're being expanded. Correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Discussion?
Well, I think it makes a difference to me that these uses have been existing in very similar spaces. I think it's reasonable, instead of him having to find new industrial tenants that wouldn't really go with the current tenants, to be able to keep the same tenants in the use that they now in the spaces that they now desire. So I think that distinguishes it from, say, another property in that district, and I think it's a reasonable use.
Nick, any thoughts?
I agree. I think that it's not going to hurt the surrounding property values. It's not going to, most people would never even notice there was a change because there are the existing businesses that are there, and they're being successful and are looking to expand and stay in the area.
Would anyone care to make a motion?
So I move to approve both of the requested variances.
Is there a second?
I second.
So moved and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The vote is unanimous. The variances are granted. He's passing. Passing of the papers here.
There's a lot more to come.
Our next case this evening is case 0118. Dustin Schoenemann for Granite Arrow Properties is requesting a special exception under the table of principal uses and in accordance with the Article 28.717 to permit the parking of one commercial vehicle, accessory use A10, used by a resident in conjunction, bless you, with an off-site occupation for property located at 87 Rumford Street in an RN residential
No, these are.
neighborhood district. Is Mr. Schoenemann here? Please come forward.
I have to excuse my appearance. I just came from work.
I think you look fine to me.
Thank you.
Warm.
Swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth.
I swear.
Would you give us your name for the record as you testify, please?
Dustin Schoenemann.
Would you like to fill us in on the high points of why you feel a special exception is... Have a seat.
Thank you.
A special exception is appropriate.
Yes, it's a vehicle. I know it classifies commercial under Concord specification, but it's I think it's a reasonable request due to the fact that the vehicle does not weigh 10,000 pounds, which is what it would need to be to have a DOT, I believe a DOT placard to stop at weigh stations. It's a 3.7-liter gas engine. It's not an obnoxious diesel. It's got a little bit of height, over 7 foot, which is my understanding why it's classified commercial. But outside of that, it's more or less a work van that fits in the area that I park it.
This is like a small box truck?
Yes. Yeah, it's a Dodge Ram 2500 cargo van, more or less.
Oh, there's a picture of it.
Yeah, it's in the,
Oh, excellent, because I didn't see one online.
no, there wasn't one.
It's from, this is a letter.
Oh,
It's not part of the original package.
No, that's the stuff that he submitted. There's a separate
Right.
letter there
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
a butter, in a butter.
The abutter stuff is here, but this is part of the package, it just wasn't. Did you get one?
have you seen this, Andrew?
No.
I
Okay.
haven't seen it either.
So this is a,
I got the special one you passed along.
You
That
somehow got special treatment here.
Nick gave it to me, so.
Currently, I don't know if this helps too, but it is my only vehicle of transportation at the moment as well. So that's a reason I can't park it off-site. So that's part of my argument to be able to allow it to stay where it's parked.
And do we have a view of the property here, Craig?
This is the property right here, 87 Rumford Street, and the parking area is to the rear of the property, right here.
So is that where you would park?
Yeah, currently I actually, I don't know if that's my truck sitting there, but this is actually where it parks regularly.
Okay. Questions from the board?
I have a question.
Sure.
In your application material, and I just want to make sure I'm clear on it, I'm not a car or truck person, but that you're saying that it's smaller than the extended cab pickup trucks?
Correct.
Okay, 'cause I just, again,
It's
it's,
shorter in length.
okay. All right.
Nick, any questions? Andrew?
no, I'm looking at this code, but no questions.
Anything else you'd like us to know?
That's it, sir.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone here who'd like to be heard in favor of this appeal? Would you come forward? Would you step down, please, Mr. Junior? Sure. Thank you. Swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth.
I do, sir.
Would you identify yourself as you testify, please?
My name is Mark Redmond, and I am actually the property manager for Granite Narrow Properties.
All right, what would you like us to know? Have a seat.
Thank you. I am just here basically to express that from Granite Arrow Properties' perspective, our ultimate goal is to keep the city of Concord as happy as we can possibly make it. It's in our interest to make sure he can still have his van, so he can still work, so he can still pay rent. So from our perspective, that's the outcome that we would like to have occur. Beyond that, ultimately, if the city says, I want to do whatever the city directs me to do, which I believe, I don't remember who it was that directed us to deal with a fence on the property. We have removed the fence according to what the city desired in that situation. So I just wanted to express that we are here to make the city of Concord as happy as we can, but we'd also like to make sure our tenants are as happy as we can keep them as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who'd like to be heard in favor? Is there anyone who'd like to be heard in opposition?
Did you each get a handout? Because I brought extra ones.
I believe,
There's only one copy that was made, Mary.
Well, I brought extra. So do I swear in first?
would you have
or
a seat over here, please?
Oh, sure.
Here's extra did each of you get a letter? Letters
Is there a
and
letter in the?
photographs.
Yeah, well,
That's it.
that's the package right there. There's only one
That's a photograph.
copy.
Okay.
Each sets of photographs, because those are important. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, we got extra sets of every 4 sets.
Thank you.
There's a letter and there's a set of photographs.
So each of these folders is a unique set.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm Evan Mulholland. I'm Mary's neighbor. I'm here to just,
Thank you.
give her some moral support.
And do both of you swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
I do.
Oh, I need that. So it was Ed Mulholland?
Evans, E-V-A-N, Evans.
Could I get your name for the record, please?
Mary Deal, D-E-A-L. Like a
What-
good deal.
What would you like us to know? I see lots of pages here. I remind you that you've got 5 minutes to summarize what you've got to say to us.
Okay, so I wrote a 5-page letter that you now have a copy of. I had asked that it be given to you beforehand, but it wasn't. And there's a set of photographs. You probably should turn first to page 3 of the photographs. It shows the size of this vehicle. It really is a massive vehicle. It also has on top of it huge pipe and a huge ladder. And if you'll turn to the next page, page 4, this will give you an idea of how tall this vehicle is. Okay? That's like a 6-foot fence. This vehicle has been parked there out of code for many, many months. And in August, the wooden fence between that property and mine was taken down because it was in a poor state. So I was suddenly faced, after living there 23 years in tranquility, which you'll flip over to page 15, you'll see how my yard looked beforehand. And I was set at, no, page, yes, and page 6, you'll see that I was suddenly faced with looking at this really ugly, huge parking lot. The backyard, which had a partial parking lot and some yard, was totally excavated with dirt and sand and gravel laid down. And so I'd come home every day and this van would just be sticky. It would park right on my property line. Okay, so my older son came into town, page 6, and tried to construct. I was told I could build an 8-foot fence. I found it was going to cost me $2,000 to do it, okay? And they couldn't get to it until fall. This is August. So my son comes and he constructs, he sinks these poles, he does this netting, and then puts up some reed fencing. But it took him several months to do it. You can kind of get an idea on page 8. Meanwhile, I was propping things up and they'd blow down and the van would park right there. You'd think he'd get the idea that I'm trying to get some privacy. Anyway, now on 9, you'll see here the fence is up. And I still have this van looming over me. And if you look on page 10, you'll see the view from my windows, upstairs windows. And if you'll look at the top of 10, you'll see that my next door neighbors at 26. They have a complete view of this parking lot and are not able to put up a fence because the snow came up and their fence didn't even come down until December 1st. So flip over to page 1 of my letter where I address the ordinance. So number 1, special exceptions paragraph G states the requested use will not create hazards to health, safety, and general welfare, nor be detrimental to the use and out of character with the adjacent neighborhood. This is the historic White Park neighborhood. This van is not consistent. It's out of character with that. The next H, the proposed location is appropriate for the requested use. As far as I'm concerned, that is not to park a huge commercial van in a residential neighborhood in a parking lot. That parking lot has 8 abutters, 8 different properties. Look at this. Okay, and number 3, consistent. Use has to be consistent with the spirit and intent of the ordinance. Well, it seems to me the ordinances are made to preserve the character of the neighborhood. We have a very special neighborhood. White Park neighbors are very vigilant about doing everything they can to maintain the park, to maintain the character of the neighborhood in the park. You know, I've worked, Evan's worked, my neighbors have worked. I wasn't able to get around to I've been sick with the flu, so I wasn't able to get around to my other neighbors, but I'm sure other people would be here today. Okay, so page 2. So I understand the tenant's point of view. He doesn't want to have to go buy his own vehicle or get to work some other way. But I know there's plenty of people in town who do that. So while I understand, I also think that there are other solutions. Okay, so page 3, I mentioned about the wooden fence coming down and being suddenly very exposed. And also, a couple of weeks ago, right before Christmas, I look out my window and there is a U-Haul truck parked as well as a commercial van. So I kind of feel like, oh, you know, you give an inch, you take a mile. So that's another concern I have, is that if this variance exception is granted, that the next thing you'll know, the property will be asking for a variance. And then, you know, that really changes the nature of the neighborhood. So I beg you to not grant this special exemption. And
Thank you very much.
Do you have any questions?
Any questions from the board?
What was your address again? It's
22 White Street. I live across from Second Base. And there's
Second Base.
So there's
your rear abuts their rear. The rear
my
of the,
side, the rear part of my side. There's about 30 feet.
That's where this. Oh, I see. Okay.
That 30 feet. Yeah, you have it there.
Maybe
right?
you could go up there and show
That
us.
30 feet. Now it doesn't look like much there, but my backyard basically is that 30 feet strip. Keep going down because I have a garage. So it, you know, I had no privacy until the fence went up. Even now, the fence, because it's a reed fence, which is all my son could manage. He doesn't do construction work, and he had to come from out of state to do it on various weekends. It's porous, so I can see the cars in the lot, but at least it's not so bad. So I can see the van when it's parked all the way across the parking lot. Half of the land, all of the backyard of that property is now a parking lot. There is no yard. So it's kind of an irritation.
Any other questions from the board?
Thank you
Thank you very much.
for listening to me.
You bet.
So I just want to add one or two things. My name's Evan Mulholland. I live at 28 White Street, over 2 doors down there. And, you know, I just want to say, one, I'm really sympathetic to the problem that you have of, you know, this is your work van, you need to park it somewhere. The problem is not, it's not that, it's the site and the location. You know, I understand I live downtown. I'm not living out in the middle of nowhere where, you know, I've got neighbors 2 miles away. We're all pretty close together in this neighborhood. And I think the site-specific problem is that it's the whole back lot has become a parking lot, right? And I think there's 4 units in that building. So it's just not the right spot to have a bunch of commercial vehicles because everything is so close to the lot lines in the neighborhood. I mean, I don't think any of these places would be allowed to be built now because everyone's so close together. You know, I think they're all grandfathered, you know, what I'm trying to say is, it's just really the site isn't appropriate for a bunch of commercial vehicles because everything is so close. And I know it's just one, but I don't know, I think you guys should probably deny it or condition it on the property owner putting up a proper wooden stockade fence. The problem really isn't the vehicle. The problem is that the backyard was turned into a big dirt lot and the fence was taken down and now a bunch of cars are there and it's bothering Mary and the rest of the neighbors. So that's the problem. So I don't know what you can do about it because, you know, it's a special exception, but if you could, maybe you can condition it on putting up a proper wooden fence. I don't know, just an idea.
Questions from the board?
Yes, actually, I wanted, and I think you answered the question before I asked it, is the concern that it's a commercial vehicle parked there, or that all of a sudden there's cars parked there that are now in your view shed.
I'll just say, Mary can answer for herself, but I think that it's the height of this particular one. It's not like a regular car. It's, way high. It's got a bunch of stuff on top.
Yeah, because the cars don't, even with a reed, they're okay. But this thing, I built 8-foot fence. It's as tall as I'm allowed to, and it still towers over that. And they're not allowed to build more than an 8-foot fence. So.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to be heard? Please come forward. You swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth.
I do.
May we have your name, please?
Sure. I'm Gary LeMay. I live at 108 Rumford Street.
What would you like us to know, Mr. LeMay?
I guess, I'm definitely not an expert in any of these zoning laws or anything like that. I guess I just wanted to express our, generally being in favor of granting the, the exception to the rules here. It seems, this is a work car. He's doing it for his job. It's not like he's running a business out of this location or anything. So it's, living in the neighborhood, I guess we all have different perspectives. I can certainly appreciate, others' views on this, but it seems that maybe the argument is more about the cars being there in general, more so than just, he being able to have his work car there. It just seems, again, not a really technical argument, but it just seems reasonable to me, having lived in the neighborhood and not really having any major issues with it. There are a lot of residential cars that have been a lot more disruptive than his work van going to and from work.
Questions? Thank you.
Thanks.
Is there anyone else who'd like to be heard? Any comments from code enforcement?
I don't have anything to add to this one unless you have specific questions.
I do have a question of Craig.
Shoot.
Craig, could somebody have a sizable RV in the backyard?
I believe that would require a special exception in that district. RV. New pages are sticky. So outdoor storage of recreational vehicles, and remind me, we are in an RN zone. Yeah, so RN zone, recreational equipment, recreational vehicles would both require a special exception too.
Very good. Mr. Schoeneman, would you like to offer factual clarification in response to anything that you've heard?
No, sir.
Okay, very good. Thank you. With that, we'll close the public testimony portion of the hearing. We have heard testimony. We have a request for a special exception to park a van, of which we have a photograph, behind a building, and we have heard testimony from the appellant that they use this vehicle to get to and from work as well as to do work. And we have also heard testimony from two neighbors who were concerned about the appearance of the van, given its height relative to the height of any permissible fence in the area, and one neighbor who was in favor of the appeal. Discussion. Andrew, your thoughts?
Looking at the special exception criteria, it's, I think given many of them, I think he meets pretty easily. I think the toughest ones that I'm looking at are spirit and intent of this ordinance and the master plan and the location, is the proposed location appropriate for the requested use, which are the most subjective and kind of require an understanding of the neighborhood. It's a tough neighborhood because it has a residential quality, but I think because probably of built that big parking lot by the park, and then there's the law school, so it also has a pretty high demand for density and for parking all. I think there's some tension there. You know, I mean, is it reasonable that someone should never, I don't think this vehicle is particularly offensive. I mean, it does have the commercial markings on it. It is high, but is it reasonable that someone should not have to see a vehicle at all? But I can certainly understand why she doesn't want it right there in her face, in her yard. So I'm a little, I guess I'd like to hear other people's thoughts.
Nick, what do you think?
Yeah, certainly it's, the vehicle itself, it doesn't seem to be oppressively large to me. There is certainly a commercial aspect to it, which might be offensive to some. I'm not persuaded that it's large enough to be considered an issue.
This is tough because I understand not having commercial vehicles in residential neighborhoods. But from the testimony, it seemed it was more that trees were taken down, fences were taken down, excavation happened, and now all of a sudden there was a big view of what was happening there. I do know this isn't a particularly large commercial vehicle. There are pickup trucks that are sizable, that are bigger than that, may not be as high, but definitely bigger, that could be parked there without coming to this board. The issue about having that it's your only vehicle, I understand that, but that does not, for me, that's not a criteria I can take under consideration, though I do understand that and sympathize with that. I don't know if there are ways we can try to mitigate granting of the special exception because of the height of the fence. I don't know if there are other places on the property that it could be parked that might be less visible. I can't quite tell if there might be some other spot on that property that maybe if it was parked there it wouldn't be so visible, but that may just be creating an issue for other people. I'm not sure. I don't know the site well enough to know that.
No, and any sort of condition that, like that we would put on it would be essentially unenforceable.
Yes, as sometimes they are, but to at least try under good faith if there was a way to do that.
Well, I understand her point, the fence, you really can't build high enough. I wonder if they could do like a landscape, but you're still going to see it from it's a pretty dense area. I mean, even if you landscape that one spot so she can't see it very well, other people, there's numerous neighbors who could see it.
Well, I think the reason why the drafters of the ordinance made this a special exception was that the assumption was that it wasn't unreasonable to park various kinds of vehicles next to your residence, and that some of them might be, in the eyes of some people, considered commercial vehicles. So they left it to the board to decide whether any specific commercial vehicle represented an eyesore and a challenge to the fabric of the neighborhood or not. So I think that's essentially the question we're being asked. I think you're quite correct. The fact that it's his only car is not, that's not one of the criteria for a special exception. Looking at the photographs of the car, my reaction to it is that, yeah, it's unusually tall, but it's not my idea of a heavy-duty commercial vehicle, which I think is what the drafters had in mind. They didn't want to see a semi-trailer or a big boom truck parked next to an apartment house all the time. But I think this kind of van was exactly the sort of thing that probably they had in mind when they made it permissible by special exception. Is there anyone who would care to make a motion, either for or against?
I'll make a motion to grant the special exception as presented.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Somebody seconded it, I'm not sure who. Okay.
Who's going to take responsible for it? Andrew or Nick?
Nick is Nick is going to carry the weight on this one.
Okay.
And I assume that the motion is based on your belief that they meet the criteria.
Oh, yes, yes.
Special exception. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The vote is unanimous. The special exception is granted.
I'll take the folders back to get back to
It has to go, doesn't it?
you have one
As long as
set.
we have one, so
Right.
make sure we have
I was gonna
one
give
full
them back
copy.
because you
I'll let you
requested
sort.
them back.
Okay. Well, we have, do you have one, Craig?
Yes, I think so, yep. Yeah, well, we have the original that was submitted, and then these.
I'll
Yep.
give them to
Okay.
you. Thousands.
The next case this evening is case 0318, Irving Oil Marketing Incorporated for Irving Oil Properties, NH Corp. The applicant plans to remove and replace the existing structures and requests the following: a variance to the minimum yard requirements and Section H, the table of
Oh.
dimensional.
Wait. NHSD Holdings for.
Oh, I'm
Manchester.
sorry. I skipped one over.
Oops, got the wrong file
Yes.
too.
Thank you for stopping me.
Whichever you prefer.
Thank you for stopping me before I,
It's my fault.
0218. We're going to get to one of these cases here. NHSD Holdings LLC for Manchester Sand, Gravel, and Cement Company. The applicant wishes to develop a commercial recreation facility and requests the following: under a variance to the table of principal uses to permit commercial indoor recreational facility, use C3, where such use is not permitted in the industrial or residential open space districts. A variance to the table of principal uses to permit a privately owned outdoor recreational facility, use C5, where such use is not permitted in the industrial districts. For property at 200 Sheep Davis Road, on a property that is transected by a district boundary for the IN Industrial District and the RO Residential Open Space District. Gentlemen, do you promise to tell the truth?
I do.
The truth. Thank you. Would you identify yourselves for the record as you testify?
Thank you very much. My name is Philip Hastings. I'm an attorney with Cleveland Waters and Bass. I represent the applicant, NHSD Holdings LLC, tonight. I have some material to hand out before I make further introductions.
What was your name again, sir?
Oh, my name is Joel Hatton.
Joel
I'm the-
Hatton.
Yep, I'm the CEO of NHSD.
Thank you.
HATT?
HATIN.
Excuse me. We also have with us tonight Joel's partner, Frank Bizzarro, in the front row, also from NHSD Holdings, Chris Nadeau from Nobis Engineering, and Jason Abbott from the Farley Group, which is the manufacturer of the facility that we're going to be talking about tonight. Mr. Abbott has traveled from Toronto to be here. I think ordinarily we might have deferred till next week for a full board, but because Mr. Abbott has traveled this way and decided to weather the impending bomb that is hitting us, we feel like we would like to make the presentation tonight. If the board feels that there's additional information that you feel more comfortable with the full board, we would defer until next week after we make that presentation.
From our point of view, it makes no difference to us whether we have a full board or a four-member board.
Okay.
Strictly your call.
We'll proceed. The application is for a use variance to permit the commercial indoor recreational facility in the industrial zone and a privately owned outdoor recreational facility in the industrial district. The property is at 200 Sheep Davis Road, which is at the southerly end of Route 106 along the border with the town of Pembroke. It's a somewhat unique property. It's currently owned by Manchester Sand and Gravel. NHSD has a purchase and sale agreement to acquire the property, subject to getting necessary approvals. As you can see, the property is bounded on the south and east by the Selkirk River. This is a former gravel excavation site. To the north, it's bounded by the E.J. Prescott facility, and the state of New Hampshire owns the land where the circular portion is. It appears from Google that that's some sort of training facility.
The New Hampshire Fire Training Academy, that circular portions, airplane that they use for fire training for airplane rescue. Yeah.
I'm going to have Mr. Haddon talk a little bit more about the property itself and the proposed use. One of the other fairly unique features of this property is the slope of the land. It slopes as you're heading into Pembroke on Route 106. There's a downward grade. And you can see in the topo layers there, the topography of the lot slopes off to a plateau. So there's, from the Concord side, there is very limited visibility of the site itself as it drops off. The other unique feature of this property is it's bisected by by a zoning line. It's industrial for the bulk of the site. And RO along the shoreline, the shoreland area. That area is also subject to a conservation easement to the city of Concord, which limits its use and indicates it has some sensitivity to the river. So I will turn the presentation over to Mr. Haddon to give a better description. As I said, we've got the full team here to talk if you have specific questions about the use, technical questions, and then I'll review the legal standards after that.
Great, thank you everybody, appreciate your time tonight. So what we're looking to do is we're actually looking to build a supported air structure over a full-size, what would be a soccer field, that would allow us to basically offer training opportunities and rental opportunities for the children in our community, to have an opportunity to continue sports training regardless of sport, from lacrosse, soccer, football, all year round. There are facilities like this in Massachusetts, and a lot of us travel to those facilities, feels like every night. This would put one in our backyard. It would allow our organizations, or allow our children's organizations to utilize these facilities to continue the training, allow them to be competitive, and from our perspective, it's a structure that we would keep up year round. There's some very uniqueness to the property. As we were discussing, we're looking at 34 acres is the total purchase and sale agreement, but there's really 15 to 16 acres that's truly usable for us. We plan on sticking into that residential area, the industrial area, as much as humanly possible in order to obviously preserve what's going on naturally around the river. But more importantly, it offers us some very unique pieces of features that we discussed a few moments ago. There's that berm going along Sheep Davis Road that really makes it hard to see anything from inside that particular area. And the fact that the other property is elevated at a higher level, you'd really need to pull in, or you'd only see it briefly as you're coming north off of 106. So when we talk about the concept of putting in a domed facility, this particular location gives us the ability to kind of set it back, set it off to the side, and really make it a great location that would kind of keep it out of eyesight and allow children an opportunity to continue training year round. The other interesting concept from the site perspective is it gives us the ability to put two of these up as we grow. We've done some market research. We've got organizations that want to start using this right away. In fact, if we had this thing up, knowing the storm's coming, people would be in there using this today. There's such a need for space like this in our area. So this particular site and this location is unique to us because it gives us the opportunity to expand and to grow this and really make it a focal point for athletic training in our state and put it right here in our city. what we're going to do to the property from a kind of overall changes perspective is it's existing sand and gravel pit today. It's relatively flat, so it makes it very attractive for us to literally grading we need to do, put a turf field down, and then put structure on top of it. So it makes it very unique for us to find a piece of property like this in the area. We expect to reach out, and we have been reaching out to all ends of athletes, from collegiate to town organizations to youth recreation programs to travel organizations to elite programs that are looking for a facility in order to train. There really aren't that many facilities in the area. We are talking about a dome structure. That the reason why we're looking at a dome structure is because it gives us the capability to have a full-length field simulating a full soccer field or a full football field, or from a baseball perspective, being able to actually take batting practice in a full structure and be able to hit the ball from one end of the dome to the other end of the dome. We just felt that this location is prime for what we're trying to do, and we've looked at locations for me personally. I've been looking at this for several years now, but this location is perfect for what we're trying to do.
In terms of the legal requirements, I've addressed in the application how we believe we meet the 5 variance requirements for this use. The use is technically classified as a commercial indoor recreational facility and/or privately owned outdoor recreation facility would be an ancillary use depending on the need. Neither of those uses are permitted in the IN district. Privately owned outdoor recreational facilities are permitted RO district. There's a very limited number of districts under the ordinance where this type of facility would be allowed as of right. And in those districts, the type of land that would be required to support this are very rare and difficult to find. So this location is unique. It's uniquely situated for this particular use. With respect to the 5 criteria, I won't go in detail through the application. I think I've addressed all those, but there are some important facts that I'd like to highlight for you. One is we believe this use is reasonable for the location. It's not unlike indoor health and fitness centers, which are allowed as of right in the industrial district. It's just a matter of particular use, and the scope of that use, I think, would be the distinguishing feature there. As I said, there are limited areas with this type of access for this use. Due to the location near the river, traditional industrial uses that are permitted as a right really are not well suited for this and would potentially have a much more adverse impact on the surrounding area and on the environment. We think this use will be a good transitional area from the river northward as you get into a more industrial area at the top of the slope and away from the river. It would protect it'd be consistent with the conservation easement that the city holds on this property. As Mr. Hatton indicated, it's consistent with the zoning ordinance and the spirit and intent of the zoning ordinance. One of those purposes is to serve the recreational needs of the city of Concord and the surrounding communities. This will certainly do that. We do not believe, because of the mix of industrial, commercial, and office type uses in the surrounding area, we believe there'll be no diminishment of value to the surrounding properties. And then the final factor, I don't know how long you folks have been on this board. I know some of you are new. In 2006, there was a similar proposal for a property on Integra Drive that came before this board. The exact same variance property in the industrial zone, partially, and Craig, stop me if I'm wrong, I believe it was also transected by some RO.
Correct, yeah, it was up on the bluff. Portions of the property was in the RO zone.
And the board, in that decision, granted the variance, recognizing that this was a reasonable use. My recollection is in 2006, the variance standards, we were still operating under a little tougher variance criteria in the post-simplex era. The legislature has loosened those standards, so we feel that it would certainly be serve substantial justice to grant the variance, in this case, in a very similarly situated property. And we're happy to answer any questions you have.
I've got a question for Craig. Can you clarify for me, Craig, what is and isn't allowed here? The request is for a commercial indoor recreational facility and a privately owned outdoor recreational facility. But Mr. Hastings made reference to another type of recreational facility that is permitted. Was it privately owned?
Health and fitness.
Health and fitness centers, yes.
Centers
Right, yeah.
are permitted.
Correct.
So
a Planet Fitness, well, not to use any brand names, but place similar to a Planet Fitness could go into an industrial
as to why this is not allowed, but those, I mean, are?
Well, again, the traditional idea of a commercial indoor recreational facility, I think you're going to be thinking of a bowling alley, billiard hall, something of that nature. This may not have been an anticipated use at the time that they were developing the ordinance, but by definition, this is the category that it would fit into. So those types of uses would not necessarily be appropriate for an industrial zone.
Oh, because it's more of like a social type of thing.
Correct,
is the
yes.
idea to, okay.
If I can add too, and maybe Mr. Abbott could comment on this, I think the technology of these types of facilities has evolved since the zoning ordinance was put in place. I don't think the ordinance really anticipated this type of structure in any zone.
I don't believe this type of activity really existed to any great extent at the time the ordinance was originally adopted either. You might have a hockey arena, but these large sports facilities, I think, are something that have developed in more recent history.
I also have a question for you, Mr. Hatton. In looking at the plan, there's a mention in your application about the possibility of outdoor recreation facilities, and I think Mr. Hastings made an allusion to that too. And looking at the plan, I don't see where they would go. What was your thinking on that?
Yeah, so, I mean, our original concept is the two dome structures. Now, these domes are, you do have the ability to put them up and take them down if you want. Our plan is to keep them up year-round. If there is the ability for us to add in, a smaller field outside that would be turf covered for, kids that just would rather be outside versus inside, we may explore that. But as of right now, we're set up with the understanding that we're going to do the two covered structures.
Okay.
It was also my understanding, though, there is the possibility you could take it down.
Correct.
So this is covering that potential
Exactly.
possibility.
Okay.
Exactly.
Because looking at the site, if I'm reading this plan correctly, about the only place you could do that with the buildings there is now covered with parking lots.
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, there are locations that do put these up and take them down every year.
I see.
And just to be clear, for the record, this is a concept plan. Novus Engineer is working on the final site engineering for this, so there may be some minor tweaks in this. We're working out the parking arrangements, but we wanted to have the flexibility on the use to incorporate those into the engineering plans.
And please refresh my memory. I believe we had some discussion on the possibility of not necessarily paving all the proposed parking.
Yes.
Because of the infrequency of the maximum uses, and so some of those areas designated for parking could remain open, grassed areas too, right?
Yeah, our hope is to keep the parking to a relative minimum to serve the needs. If we can keep as much pervious surface as possible, that would be a design goal of ours.
Am I correct that the topography of this property is largely a result or an artifact of the fact that it was a gravel pit?
Probably in part. It certainly was an active excavation site. I think naturally the land slopes off to the river.
Right.
I think they've probably created some artificial plateaus as Manchester Sand and Gravel excavated.
Yeah. Okay.
That's a 2000 aerial here, looking at the property, and I'm slightly familiar with the property, and yeah, it was a continual slope down to the river. This whole area has been essentially excavated, I think, as you can see.
To make a plateau.
Right. You know, these areas, you know, are pretty steep drop-offs all around the perimeter of it there, so it has been extensively excavated.
So the topo I'm reading here, we go downhill fairly sharply to where the buildings will go from the north side. It levels out, and then we go downhill again to the river as a cross-section.
Yes, yes, I believe that's correct.
Okay. Other questions from the board?
Should the Concord community be concerned that a similar structure like this, not far from here, sustained a major collapse a couple of years ago?
Actually, it collapsed last season. The reason why it collapsed is because they, and we can have Jason kind of comment on this state of new technology. The reason why it collapsed is, as far as our understanding, is they went up onto the roof of that structure with shovels to remove snow. But that's old technology. They put that dome in 10 plus years ago. At least. There is new technology that allows you to heat those cylinder in the membranes that allows you to kind of keep that snow off. So we're talking, you know, brand new technology that would allow us to kind of maintain, you know, a lot of that without having to go on I don't want to get on the roof, and that's my partner Frank. He definitely does not want to get on the roof. So we won't be doing that.
Okay. Other questions from the board?
Can you, I just want to make sure I'm clear on the uses for recreational facilities, the indoor recreational, so it's sports, but I also heard potential boat shows, anything else that might be, in theory, happening?
So right now, our business plan is 100% focused on sporting activities, right? So the summer months, traditionally, these types of facilities may house a car show or a boat show or something like that. It's not in our existing business plan for us to do that, but we would be dismissed to not potentially look at that when months are slow. Again, our goal is to be operational as a full-time sporting facility, offering an opportunity for the kids in the area to kind of train year-round. But those two are the only ones that we can really think of today that come to mind as potential opportunities.
And we've had this discussion with Mr. Walker about what those types of uses would qualify as accessory to the recreational use as opposed to a separate principal use, which we are not asking for a variance for. So any of those uses would be limited to what's permitted as accessory to the recreational primary use.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the board? Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone who wishes to be heard in favor of this appeal? Is there anyone who wishes to be heard in opposition to it? Please come forward.
Yeah.
Swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth.
Yes.
Would you gentlemen identify yourselves for the record, please?
I'm Ronald Mahoney, and I live at 203 Sheep Davis Road.
My name is Richard Hill. I am his son-in-law, who also is going to be living at 203 Sheep Davis Road.
So are you neighbors nearby?
We're right across the street.
Okay. What would you like us to know?
Well, first of all, I was wondering what they anticipate for the number of vehicles going in and out of this place. How many parking lots do they have?
I don't know the answer to that, but we'll get them to answer it.
For 50 cars or so? Well, my main problem is I'm not against the project, but the hill in that road, I don't think it can handle it. Coming down over the hill, it's all guideline on my side of the road. The other side, coming across from Pembroke, it's guideline posts. There's no pull-off area at all.
And there's a bridge.
Right now, when I come out of my driveway, I've been there for about 40 years, I can't, sometimes it's 15 minutes to get out of my driveway. And I'm a single-family home. Now, that's not counting anything across the street.
That's because of the traffic?
Yeah, the guidelines, those are on the right-hand side all the way down. From the top of the hill all the way down. The only opening is my driveway.
Where is your driveway? Farther up the hill here?
No, it's down the hill.
Farther
It's
down,
just,
towards the
just
parking
past
lot?
the bridge.
There's no place to pull a car over on that white side of that white line. And if cars are turning in and out, it's chaos.
Yeah.
Is that your driveway there?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
And then that's the driveway going into the proposed facility there.
and that's their side, yeah.
Well, so with the sand and gravel, there hasn't been much traffic from their vehicles? The prior use, there wasn't much
Prior
traffic?
use was dump trucks.
It was just a single-family house years ago.
Yeah, but as far as use from sand and gravel, I can't remember that there were a continuous flow of trucks out of there at any given time. You know, there's one or two trucks, saying it was definitely a smaller operation over there. So you couldn't say that that was that kind of impact, but I could certainly tell you from the time they closed it down to what 106 looks like now, the traffic is twice what it was.
It's like a baby
then.
turnpike over there. I mean, I don't know where all the traffic's coming from myself. I've been here 40 years. I never had trouble. I could go out of my driveway anytime, but the last 2 years, it's really bad.
Questions from the board? Andrew, any questions? Thank you, gentlemen.
Okay.
Is there anyone else who would like to be heard in opposition? Craig, do you have any comments from code enforcement?
Just, regarding traffic flow and such like that, those are issues that the planning board, and again, this would go for a major site plan review to the planning board. I would expect that planning and engineering would be requiring traffic studies and be looking at those issues quite specifically.
The types of uses that would be permitted here could also generate traffic, correct?
Yeah, there's a number of industrial uses, and again, all those would be looked at the same way. There could be a trucking facility in here or something of that nature. So
There could be a child daycare or adult daycare, which could generate quite a bit of traffic.
Mr. Hastings, would you like to offer any factual clarification?
Yeah, the only thing I would like to add to what Mr. Walker said on that is because of this location, it's outside the urban compact, so it's a state highway and will require a DOT permit as well as site plan review. So we're happy to work with, I believe he said, Mr. Mahoney and Mr. Hill to alleviate his concerns, and it is something we will address during the site plan review process.
Thank you. With that, we'll declare the public testimony portion of the hearing closed. We have a request for 2 variances, I believe. One to allow a commercial indoor recreational facility, and one to allow for a privately owned outdoor recreational facility. We heard testimony that the property The topography of the property would tend to conceal the buildings, that the availability, that the type of use that they are contemplating was not around at the time that the ordinance was written, and that the location is an ideal one for the type of development that they would like to do. We also heard testimony from neighbors who were concerned about the impact of traffic, additional traffic, particularly vehicles stopping and turning. Discussion.
My concern was as well the traffic, but DOT will have to issue a driveway permit for this, and will probably require upgrades along that section of 106 due to the traffic anticipated. I think the use is good for the site, but I do have concerns about the, I guess, the lack of specificity of outdoor uses. I think that it's a good use for the two domes. I think it will be good because you can't see it from the road. It is, as the gentleman said, nice to find a flat piece of land of this size. But as presented tonight, I'm uneasy with the uncertainty with the outdoor uses that possibly could be there. So if and when we go to look at voting, I would like it if we could separate the two variance requests.
We certainly can. Nick, your thoughts?
Consider that this is very similar to the definition of a privately owned indoor health and fitness center in terms of primary uses. I'm inclined to support it.
Very good. Andrew?
Yeah, I agree. It's, as Craig was saying, it doesn't really fit neatly into the, the definitions given, but that's the best. But there aren't really any, there's barely any zones that something like this could go, and there are probably no sites that they could find where it could go otherwise. So I do agree this is reasonable.
I think.
Yeah, go ahead.
Were you not?
Well, no, I was just gonna say, I think I'm thinking about the point Laura made about the outdoor use, because that's not as compelling, really, because there probably are numerous other places they could find an outdoor use for fields. They didn't give a lot of specificity because they're honest. They don't really have a full vision of that right now. So that might be something that they would have to have developed better and come back for variance if they have an idea on that.
All right. What I was going to say is that I think you can make the argument that the site is peculiar, that it's unlike any of the other sites in the area because of the previous use as a gravel pit, which doesn't lend it to every conceivable other use that might come along. And its topography is unusual as well as its proximity to the river. I think there's a point well taken in that this is not the type of use that's likely to generate problems for with water pollution. Would anyone care to make a motion? Let's take these, as Laura suggested, on two separate numbers here. Number one, a variance to the table of principal uses to permit a commercial, indoor, or recreational facility where such use is not permitted in the industrial or residential open space districts.
And on that, I'll move approval.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
It's moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The vote is unanimous. The variance is granted. On the subject of the outdoor recreational facility, we have two choices here. We could, I think your point's very well taken, and it was of concern to me when I looked at the site plan and couldn't figure out what was going to be outdoors and where. We could table that request for a variance, or we could say that because of insufficient information, we can't grant it. I think you could table it for the same reason.
Well, if we table it, if we deny it, does that make it more difficult for them to come back later? Or if they come back with a plan, they could...
Yeah, my reservations about denying it, conceivably, I suppose it could. But my other reservation is, since we don't really know what they're asking for, how can we either approve or deny it? So there really isn't a rationale for saying no either.
And if we table it, is it set for a date certain?
No.
Or they can reopen it?
No, they would have to make a request for the board to take it off the table and be re-noticed as if it was an original hearing. And again, if it is denied, then the applicant would have to first demonstrate that the request is significantly different in manner or purpose than what was originally denied in order for you to take it up again. So.
But if it's tabled, they don't have to meet that. Then we can just consider it
Correct.
as it is now with any additional information they provide.
Yes.
Very good. Do I hear a motion? Either to table or to deny, or to approve, for that matter.
We might have 4 different votes. I move to table. I think tabling makes the most sense. You know, so they have a chance to think about it and present a plan before we decide anything.
Is there a second? Oh, guys, come on.
I'll second it for discussion.
Okay. Did you have reservations about tabling?
I think denying it's cleaner, because anything they come back with would I would imagine would be showing that it's substantially different, because it would actually be a plan showing outdoor recreational uses. So I just think tabling it makes it not as clean in the process as it goes to the planning board and potentially any appeals or anything like that. They still have to go through all the process to get it off the table as they would to bring a new application forward.
Mm-hmm.
I would imagine. There isn't much difference. Maybe a fee here and there. So.
There'll be a fee either way.
Okay. So really no different. I'm saving you no money there. So.
Nick, any thoughts?
Well, it's so generalized in the second variance, and really I think we wouldn't have a problem reconsidering it if there was any kind of specificity to a new request.
With that, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor of the motion to table, say aye.
I made the motion, so
Yeah.
vote aye.
Okay, I guess we get 2 ayes and no ayes over here. The motion fails for lack of a majority. Do I have an alternate motion?
I'll make a motion to deny the variance based on lack of information to meet the criteria.
All right.
I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded to deny the variance. I think we've discussed the issue. I think we don't need to discuss it any further. All those in favor of the variance, of the motion to deny, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? The vote is unanimous. A deadlock jury was not going to help your case. And now the case that I was overeager to get to before, case 0318, Irving Oil Marketing Incorporated for Irving Oil Properties, New Hampshire Corporation. The applicant plans to remove and replace existing structures and requests the following. A variance to the minimum yard requirements and the table of dimensional regulations to permit a minimum 15-foot front setback for the fuel dispenser canopy where a 20-foot setback is required. A variance to the Article 2877G3 for parking to be located to the side or rear of a building to allow parking to be located in the front of the building, between the building and the street. And a variance to Article 28710A parking lot perimeter landscaping to permit a 5-foot landscape strip adjacent to North Fruit Street where a 10-foot landscape strip is required for property located at 190 Pleasant Street in a CN neighborhood commercial district. You swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Would you identify yourselves for the record as you testify?
Sure. For the record, my name is Maria Dolder. I'm an attorney. I represent Irving Oil. With me is Frank Montero from MHF Design and Jennifer Daigle from Irving Oil. I'm sure most of you are familiar with the site. It's at the corner of Pleasant Street and North Fruit Street, and it's been in existence for quite a long time. It's in somewhat disrepair at this point in time. So the proposal on the table to you is that this spring the applicant is going to replace the existing underground tanks on the property. Simultaneous with that tank replacement, they are looking to redevelop this site. Now, there it is. So the existing site, the general layout of the site will remain the same. But as part of the redevelopment, they are proposing to construct a new updated retail building on the property, as well as a new canopy. Now, the retail store itself is permitted by right on the property, and it does comply with the setbacks. And even though the building itself that we're proposing is a little bit larger than what sits there today, that will also still meet all of the setback requirements. So the building itself is permitted on site. Now, as I'm sure you can imagine, this is a relatively small site, and given how it's already been laid out, there are a number of grandfathered nonconformities that already exist on this site. As part of this proposal, we are going to get rid of and or minimize a number of those nonconformities. But we certainly can't comply with all of it, which is why we still need the 3 variances. First of all, the location of the canopy. The current location of the canopy is within the setback. It's, we hold a 14.6-foot setback, and we need a 20-foot setback. The new canopy that'll be put on the property will be generally in the same location, but we're able to move it back so that we have a 15-foot setback. I know that's a very minimal change, but we are able to at least do better than what currently exists on the property. In doing that, we're also able to improve the circulation and the spacing at the dispensers. Second, the current parking layout on the property. As you can tell, given the location of the building and how this property lays out, all of the parking is within the front of the building. This is kind of a unique property because of the fact that it's a corner lot, so it technically has 2 frontages. And as I'll explain to you later, it's even confined more because of the fact that the 2 frontages are a collector and an arterial street. Under your zoning ordinance, those 2 streets have stricter requirements. Because of that, we can't put parking anywhere else. The parking layout is going to generally remain the same as it exists on the property today, but we do need a variance for that because of the fact that we are reconstructing the building. In doing the reconstruction, we are able to eliminate parking along Pleasant Street. So they currently have some parking spaces that are right on Pleasant Street. We are able to eliminate those parking spaces, and so therefore the parking will be compliant with the setbacks. So currently that parking space is in the setback. We're going to eliminate it and we'll hold the setback for parking. In addition, the landscape buffer. So the landscape buffer that we're looking to reduce is along North Fruit Street. So it's the boundary that basically is to the rear of the Concord High School. What we're asking to do is to reduce that from 10 feet to 5 feet so that we can bring the aisle width of the parking area and the width of the parking spaces into compliance. So currently that parking area isn't compliant with your zoning. But if we're able to reduce that buffer by the 5 feet on that side, we're able to bring the parking into compliance. The interesting note on that particular side is that any other street within the city would only require a 5-foot buffer, which is what we're proposing. Because this is considered an arterial and collector street, it increases to 10 feet. So we're not saying that we're not going to have any buffer. We'd just like to reduce it so that we can bring more important parts of the site into compliance with your zoning ordinance. Now, given what the limitations of this property and the fact that it's been previously built upon, I mean, this has been developed, the layout is already there. The applicant is unable to obtain any further land, so they can't increase the site at all. They are not able to redevelop the site at all without some variance relief. So the 3 variances that we are requesting are the minimal relief that is needed to upgrade this site and update it and, bring it more into conformity with your zoning ordinance. And the truth of the matter is if they're not able to obtain these 3 variances, then all of the nonconformities that exist on this site today will remain. So I know we have some pictures of the site, we have the layout of the site. Before I get into the actual, nitty-gritty of the variance, do you have any questions? Do you want to see the pictures? How would the board like to proceed?
I think the plan that we have in front of us is pretty complete. So I don't know that we need to go into detail about pictures.
This is just a general idea of what the anticipated new building will look like. Obviously, it's a rendering. It's clearly an upgrade to what exists on the property currently.
Well, you'll be pleased to hear that the zoning board is not in charge of judging the appearance.
No, we just wanted to give the board an idea of what we were looking to do on the site. One of the reasons is, under the variance criteria, it has to be aesthetically pleasing with the neighborhood and fit into the neighborhood. I think that the building that they're proposing is certainly in keeping with the surrounding uses.
Would you, I think of significant interest to the board is the degree to which you are bringing the site more in compliance versus the degree to which you are bringing it into less compliance. Could you address that again?
Yeah, absolutely. So the only thing that will be quote-unquote less compliant is the landscape buffer. Everything else that we're asking for, even though we need a variance for it, is actually bringing the site into more conformance. So a few things that we're able to do. The building's going to be larger on the site, but even with that, we are able to reduce the lot coverage on the property from 89.7 to 82.1%. So we're bringing the lot into greater conformance, and according to Mr. Walker, we didn't need a variance because that was site-specific. And since we're reducing it and making it in more conformance, the other thing that we're able to do is, like I said, it might be minimal, but the location of the canopy currently is within the setback. So we only hold a 14.6-foot setback currently. We're able to hold a 15-foot setback with a new canopy. So we're not creating a greater nonconformity. It might be slight, but it's still a slight step in the right direction towards more conforming. In terms of parking, like I said, we are able to, with the buffer decrease to the 5 feet, we are able to bring the width of the parking lot aisles and also the width of the parking spaces themselves into conformity. So currently, the parking itself is not compliant with zoning ordinance. The sizes are too small, and the parking aisle width is too short or too narrow. We're also able to eliminate a parking lot area right there. Yeah, right there. Exactly where Craig is pointing to. We're going to eliminate parking right there on Pleasant Street, and that'll get it out of the setback. So currently, we are allowed to have parking within the setback on Pleasant Street. We're going to eliminate that.
And the use of the building, the facility is going to be the same as it is now?
Yes, it is. It's going to be larger.
Convenience store, fuel station.
Correct. Yeah, the use of the property itself is not changing at all. And the general layout of the property itself is not changing at all. It's just that we are not able, because of the way the zoning ordinance is written, we're not able to redevelop or make any changes to the building itself without activating some of these variance requirements.
Questions from the board?
I have a question. How are you going to, and it might be in the plan sets from Frank, but I appreciate you removing that parking space right on the street, but how are you making it so people aren't going to park there unless you're taking up the pavement or putting a planter there or something? Because if it stays as asphalt, I would imagine people are going to park there.
Yeah, this is the space, I don't know if you can hear me, but we're proposing to stripe it as not parking.
Perhaps, why don't you bring the board up a little bit closer, because you're in the Stygian gloom back
I was going to say, there's also a microphone, wireless mic there, I think. Might need to be turned on.
Hello?
Oh, sounds good.
Hello?
Okay, maybe not.
This is the space in question here that we're proposing to stripe as non-parking. The reason we're proposing to stripe it is that we need this circulation pattern for the fuel tanker to exit the site. So the pavement's needed for circulation purposes, but not for parking purposes. So we did contemplate turning that into green space, but for that reason, we did not.
Okay. Thank you.
That's where I guess all the time. Could be other conditions.
Any other questions from the board?
Just mumbling. Just mumbling.
Oh, mumbling? But you don't want to mumble a question. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there anyone who would like to be heard in favor of this appeal? Is there anyone who would like to be heard in opposition to it? Any comments from code enforcement?
Well, I just actually had a thought, and I do need to at least ask Nick, just for the record, I believe your wife is the director of use on the abutting property. I assume you don't feel you have any conflict or... She was, okay, or preconceived notions. Okay, good. Just wanted that on the record. But other than that, no, I don't have anything additional to add.
All right, with that, we'll close the public testimony portion of the hearing. We have heard testimony. The request is to rebuild the Irving Station that is on the corner of Fruit and Pleasant over by the high school. We have heard testimony that in order to do so, reconfiguring the site will bring several areas of it into more conformance, but will reduce the conformance of the, particularly I believe, of the side yard, or the side yard setback. I guess it's a front yard setback of the pavement.
Yes. Yeah.
Because they're on a corner.
Right.
Okay.
Well, let's see.
What's the landscaping?
The landscape strip.
Yes, that would be a perimeter, front perimeter landscaping strip. Yeah.
Discussion?
I think it's great that they're trying to bring the site into more conformity, considering the constraints. I'm okay with the landscape strip variance request because I'd rather see the parking come into more compliance, which is what the trade-off is with the aisle widths and the length of the parking spots. I do think, and that's why I asked the question about that front parking space, I do think that even striping it, people will park there, but you can't regulate people not following the rules. So I was hoping it was going to become green space or something else that would make it so people weren't parking there as opposed to just striping it. So.
Nick, any thoughts? Andrew?
I mean, I agree. It's, it'd be unreasonable for, it'd be unreasonable for them to discontinue this use, and it'd be unreasonable for them not to, improve it periodically. And I think their improvement plan, is consistent with the ordinance as it can be.
Yeah, traditionally, this board has always supported any kind of movement towards compliance.
Right.
Anytime we reduce the non-compliant aspect of the property.
And I don't think it was the intent of the zoning ordinance to prohibit people from modernizing their facilities. Craig, the 10-foot landscape strip, is that required on street fronts in this zone? Is that what the story is?
Well, it's the collector and or arterial street requirement. Again, spaces like Manchester Street, Loudon Road, such like that, where you have high traffic volumes, you want to separate the areas, give a little more buffer between the uses in the street, especially.
Right.
And the same goes for this area too.
But if I'm not mistaken, when you cross over North Fruit Street gets, maybe it's just because I don't go there, but it doesn't get as much traffic as South Fruit, does it?
No, it doesn't.
Doesn't it sort of dead end up there? Or?
It doesn't dead end, but it's one way and it doesn't get a lot of use.
Yeah, it gets a lot of high school traffic
school buses.
During school buses, people picking up, even in the evening when they do the continuing ed classes type things, adult education classes. There's quite a amount of traffic there, a lot of parking along the street and such. So,
I stand corrected.
I always take...
Whenever I've gone over there, there's never been anybody around.
I get my gas up there, I'll tell you know.
Okay. Well, but the reason I asked that question is in the past, the board has considered that being on a corner and having the impact of two front yards or streets exposures is a peculiar characteristic of the site that could provoke the need for a variance or justification for one.
Yeah, because there's no, to put parking in the back, there's no real back to the... Yeah, it would be absurd.
Do I hear a motion?
I move to approve all three of the variances.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded to grant all three variances. Any further discussion on the motion?
The justification, at least for me, was that it's bringing the property more into conformance.
I think everybody concurs with that. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Is anyone opposed? The vote is unanimous. The variance is granted. You're welcome. Our next case this evening, let's get some of this paperwork out of the way. Before we start getting paperwork mixed with paperwork.
It's already mixed.
Several cases mixed up together. Okay. Case 0518, Paul A. Cody for Brett Longwood and Maria Pacelli. Applicant wishes to add a second floor over an existing attached garage and requests the following. A variance for minimum yard requirements and table of dimensional regulations to permit a portion of the addition to encroach into the front setback, with the closest point being 23 feet plus or minus from the front property line, where a 25-foot setback is required, and variance to the minimum yard requirements and section table of dimensional regulations to permit a portion of the addition to encroach on the side setback, with the closest point being 13 feet plus or minus from the side property line, where a 15-foot setback is required, for property located at 66 Dominique Drive in an RS residential single-family district. Do you all promise to tell the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Would you give us your names as you testify, please?
I'm Paul Cody, owner of Cody Development. I'm the remodeling contractor that they've reached out to, also a neighbor of theirs. This neighborhood has some tight lots, like angled lots to them, and this property was put in with the garage kind of skewed from the property line, from the setbacks. So the front corner and the back corner are pretty much right at the setback. They want to add a second floor. They want to add basically a bedroom and a living space for, they're moving a mother and her husband in, an elderly couple, and they're trying to create a bedroom wherever. The garage is actually smaller than the standard garage. It's 21 by 21 and a half. So to add a bedroom and like a family room, let's say, in the front, kind of creates these two long, narrow hallways. So we're looking to cantilever off the front of the house 3 feet, and they were thinking of bumping the back of the house to line up with the back of the house, come out 5 feet, so that would, basically it puts the two corners, the front and the rear corner will go over the setback line by about 2 feet, but only at a slight angle, you know.
Where are we? Which house?
Yes, that one. So where we're looking at, the setback is right at these two corners. It kind of comes at a kind of a funky angle. So if we bump out the front, the cantilever in the front, this little corner right here will be over the property line. It comes out 2 feet over and then comes back at an angle. Same with the back here. There's a shed there that's going away. They want to come back and basically make a shed off the back of the garage so that they can create the second floor. So that also puts a little pie shape in the back where it goes 2 feet over the property line and comes back at an angle. But I did run two houses, just the house right over here. I did the same thing 2 years ago, but they fell within there.
Is it a separate unit, or is it going to be part of the same living quarters?
Part of the house. It's going to be part of the house. So basically, right behind, right in the back of this, there's a bedroom here in the back bedroom. That's going to become a bathroom and corridor. So the corridor will take you into this space, front and back room.
It just has to jut out over the garage.
Yeah, just the front corner and then the back corner will jut out. So not the footprint of the front, but the actual overhang in the front will encroach the boundary line in that front corner.
It essentially remains a single-family dwelling.
Correct.
Correct. Is there going to be a second kitchen in it?
No.
No. I mean, single-family with an accessory kitchen is also permitted by law.
Right, and it is for her aging parent, or her mother, and her husband. And I'll let her speak clearly more on that because she's needing to take care of them a little more and more, so they're not going to have them move in. So,
well, actually, the use of it is not our concern.
Okay.
In this case, because you're not asking for a use variance.
Correct.
So the cantilever it's truly a cantilever. There's no supporting columns.
Correct.
And it sticks out 3 feet.
Correct.
From the face of the garage. Is that?
Yes.
And then you would expand 5.5 feet toward the backyard?
Yes, so the back of the house sticks out 6 feet. I only went 5.5 because it creates, if I line it up, it always creates a pretty
Bad roof
hideous-
line.
Yeah, it's just a bad situation. So we stepped it in at the corner post of the house and designed it.
And is that at grade or is that up above?
The back one?
Yeah.
The back is, the grade.
That's 2 stories?
Yes, that's 2 stories. The back would be a 5.5 foot deep, basically shed, and continuing up, you'd have storage in the back of his garage. I couldn't cantilever 5 feet, so I wouldn't anyway.
And what's around you there?
There's another house right on, yeah. So basically, this kind of drops off into a little gully right here.
Uh-huh.
There's kind of no use for that right there, but then you just have the neighbor and I don't know what else you would need to know.
So the footprint of the garage isn't changing, you're really just doing,
The back will bump out 5 feet.
okay, sorry.
And that's okay. And
The wall will stay there.
Yeah, so the sidewall stays, the front where the garage door stays.
Okay.
It's just the front cantilever. And
Okay.
I know you, I don't know if you can see it, I did the same thing, I believe it's this house right here, 56. It doesn't show it there, that must be an older picture, but we did that a couple years ago.
But you didn't need a variance there?
I did not, because it was right in the setback. But we did the same 3-foot cantilever. Worked out.
And I assume that you consider it impractical to add to the back of the house within the setbacks?
Well, I mean, there'd be a lot more to it. There's the bulkhead there, there's a deck existing there, there's a little more to it than that, but I don't know, I mean, I don't know exactly know how to make it work with going off the back, tying,
Is the
that's the
question that we
kitchen and all that.
That it would, my name is Maria Pacelli. Is the question that it would, to keep it to the, keep it to
No,
that size?
the question was inspired, what underlies it is a question about whether or not it's possible or reasonable to try and build what you want to build within the setbacks.
So off the back of the house, let's say, instead of the garage, you're thinking of.
Without violating the ordinance. That was my question.
I'm not sure how you kind of would access it properly, because the way the kitchen's laid out takes up almost the whole back wall. I'd have to get a little more into getting an architect involved with that.
Oh, you don't
coming up some other plan. I don't want to blow this out of financial.
So that would be extremely complicated.
Yeah, it would be a little more complicated for sure. Absolutely.
Okay. Other questions from the board? Questions?
No.
Technicality, just my last name is misspelled. It's Longgood, not Longwood, just for the record.
Longgood?
Yes, 2 Gs.
Good, okay.
Our crack administrative team will take care of that. We
It will be
apologize.
corrected for the record.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there anyone who would like to be heard in favor of this appeal? Is there anyone in opposition to it? With that, we'll close the public testimony portion of the hearing.
Really?
Oh, I'm sorry, Craig. I almost left you out. I do apologize.
I don't take it personally.
You better have something to say.
I do.
Okay.
I'm just going to point out the fact that the development, I believe, was done in 2 phases. Phase 1 is this lower section here, and that was done more in a cluster development type layout. This area here, which abuts the back side of the property, is common open space. It will never be developed. The remainder of the development was done as a standard lot development.
Yeah.
Not much to say, but, you know.
No, I appreciate the illumination. With that, I'll declare the public testimony portion of the hearing closed and invite discussion by the board. We have a request for setback variances, one at the second floor level in the form of a cantilever, and the other, I believe, at grade level in the form of an extension on the back of garage. all of which would be to add a additional residential space to the house. Andrew, any thoughts?
Well, it's a pretty, looks like they did the best they could to stay within the setback while still building a reasonable addition that meets their needs and wouldn't be out of line with the character of the neighborhood, especially because one was just done. So I would be in favor of approving the variances.
Laura?
I think it's a reasonable use. I don't think the impact on the neighborhood will be detrimental, and I don't think there's any other spot, particularly looking at the way the house was laid out, where it would work without significant financial hardship and just rearranging the entire house. So I'm in favor.
Yeah, I mean, what persuades me the most is just the design of the lot lines. If anything is a case for an argument for hardship on uniqueness on lot lines and really severely restricting any kind of development, this would be the case for me, particularly when I look at all the neighboring lot lines. So on that basis, I would move approval.
Does anyone care to make a motion?
I just did.
Yeah.
Oh.
It's getting late.
Yeah, apparently.
I'll second the
motion. Okay, we got a motion and a second, and we're good to go. Is there any further discussion on this motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed?
Poor Chris.
Golly. You get to be my age, you expect a little respect. You don't get it.
I think I do on this one.
As little as possible.
Yeah.
Chris Netto from Novus Engineering and Steve David, a private architect.